Good afternoon. Ayan, natuloy din sa wakas ang ating
Tuloy
webinar.
din.
Yes, no. And muntik pa ulit maputol, no, because we are currently experiencing right now a very, very bad weather, no, on here in Antipolo. So kung mga taga Antipolo po dyan, mag-iingat po tayo. Malakas ang ulan, may kulog at kidlat. Stay at home, okay? Well, we are supposed to stay at home. Dapat po hindi tayo gumagala ngayon, ano? Anyway, good afternoon, Teacher Pao. Good afternoon, Teacher Jambi.
Good
Good
afternoon, Teacher
afternoon.
Franco
Yan,
and Teacher
okay.
Jambi.
So, ngayon medyo ano natin 'no, may iba yung flow natin kasi siyempre kailangan nating i-maximize yung time natin ngayon because this is already a rescheduled webinar. No, by the way, Teacher Pao, give us also no me and Sir Jambi an opportunity to explain what happened to us no
Sure.
last Saturday just to give our audience no some idea about what happened. So, we lost connection or signal. So actually, it was from a network failure from PLDT. Well, we would have like really blamed and really got angry on PLDT, but that will not do anything. So what we did is simply um, went around it and si Sir Jumpy napabili ng mga devices. Ako napapunta ako sa isang co-working space para makapagtrabaho last Monday and all other things. Na, pero we're glad na mabilis naman yung naging response ni PLDT. So from the time na nawalan kami ng connection, they have been constantly communicating with us kay the status of our reconnection. And just like last Monday, na-reconnect na kami kagad ng hapon, okay? Na-reestablish yung connection
Auto-finish
namin.
yun, di ba, Sir Franco?
Again?
Just in time for your training sa
Yes, oo. Just in time
Quezon
for
City.
yes, no? Talagang pinagpala pa din. So, thankful pa din. Okay? And again, gantong bagay, normal naman nating ma-experience na ngayon. Lalo na, kaya lang, na-realize namin, Sir Teacher Pao, talagang tumitigil ang mundo, no? Parang ngayon, parang biglang, ano nga ulit yung gagawin natin? Kasi walang
Correct.
internet.
Aga ko natulog nun. Aga ko natulog.
Ako parang 6 PM pa lang, tulog na ako nung Sunday. Anyway, again, teachers, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. So I hope that explains our predicament no last Saturday, and we apologize for any inconvenience or any problems no that it brought to you. Especially alam ko po naka-schedule ang mga webinars natin sa ating mga calendars, and I know medyo may mga nalito, naguluhan sa ating schedule. Okay? So, Teacher Pao, no, we'll go away with a shout out for today because we'd like to maximize our time
Yes.
for today.
Oo.
And why not first give us no, the context, no, what is our topic for today and why is this important?
Okay, so for today, no, as you can see in our banner, the title of our webinar today is Strategies and Approaches in Mainstreaming Differently Abled Students. So at this point, no, of course, our challenge is that we are all limited, no, in terms of our resources, no. So how will students who have different needs adapt to the same classroom, no, that you have? No, so I think it's very important for us to be equipped, no? Kasi alam na alam natin na ang education hindi siya one size fits all. No, so it's very important to get into to get ways, no, to find strategies such that the students who are differently abled will achieve success, no, even given those challenges. So we are very lucky, no, to have our two speakers still available for us, no, to help us really with this webinar, Sir Franco.
Yes, no. Sir Jambi, Teacher Pao, hindi ko alam kung napanood nyo na yung isang video. There's a popular video about this, about suing school. And in that video, nakalimutan ko lang yung pangalan niya. In that video, he talked about schools treating all students like a fish and teaching them how to swim. Not thinking that not everyone is a fish in that classroom. No? So that's actually somehow no very similar to what we're trying to do today on looking at differences of our students, especially in their abilities or learning abilities. Okay? And hoping that we can have, of course, Teacher Pao and Sir Jambi, our reality is that we can't have like an ideal classroom that accommodates all nuances, no, and all the things and all differences. That's That's what we hope. But right now, especially in the Philippine education, that's not yet possible. Okay, but what we hope is that we get to increase, okay, no matter how small, the inclusivity of our classroom, especially right now in a distance learning modality. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today and aim to do today. So we have two speakers for today, and there's a difference on what they're going to tackle, Teacher Pau. Our first speaker will be talking about primarily on the actual practices, what's being done, okay, in another country, because she's actually based in another country right now. And of course, our second speaker for today will contextualize it in the Philippine context. What can be done, what's being done, okay, and what are we doing right now in the Philippine education when we in relation to inclusion. Okay, so Sir Jambi, let's maybe start with the introduction of our first speaker for today. And would you please do the honor of introducing our first speaker for today?
Of course, as always, my pleasure. Mga kaagapay, our first of two very special guests this afternoon has worked in the Philippines as a general ed teacher catering to learners with special needs. But she has also worked in the UAE as a SPED resource teacher and is now actually currently based in Greenville County School District, South Carolina, USA, as a special education teacher at Grove Elementary School. So ladies and gentlemen, mga kaagapay, ikinagagalak po namin ipakilala sa inyo si Ms. Glyza Ellen May Castillo.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, teachers. Good afternoon, Kaagapay team. So thank you for this opportunity to be able to share what we are having in here. And hopefully, my hopes is that sana makatulong sa mga kapwa natin guro sa Pilipinas, especially sa mga bata. Ayan. So my main topic for today is about strategies and approaches in mainstreaming differently abled students here in the US. So let's start.
Teacher Glay,
Yes po.
before siguro tayo mag-start, no, we'd like to first of course, no, greet you. A good morning, I think. A good morning on your end. It's good afternoon on our end, okay? But anyway, before we start, maybe we could give us a short description or overview of what's going to transpire for in your sharing for today.
Yes po. So today, as mentioned, I will be discussing like how inclusion is practiced in here, and then least restrictive environments, and then for each least restrictive environment, there will be like strategies that will be shared, and then of course I will share with you. It's not always rainbows and butterflies, so there will always be challenges, and how. What are the things that we did to overcome those challenges? Well, there's no perfect scene. Kung perfect lang ang mundo, sana lahat ng bata nasa magandang kinalalagyan ngayon. But yeah, we can only do so much, and we always try, and I know you always do, you do the same thing sa Pilipinas for the kids. So challenges, what we did, and basically yun po.
Thank you, Teacher Glay. So, admins, okay, we can begin. Teachers, enjoy. And we'll be in the chat now if you need assistance or help or questions. Teacher Glay will be focusing on the presentation for the meantime. So, Teacher Glay, good luck, and the floor is yours now.
Thank you.
Good luck po.
Thank you. So, yan po. Before we start our session, I would like to ask our teachers so you can comment your answer. So, true or false? Ayan. Placing students with special educational needs with regular ed learners in a classroom is inclusion. So I want to know your thoughts. So is it true or false? So if you have like a quick explanation, you can drop it down in the chat box. So yeah, I'll give you 30 seconds. True or false? So ayan, may nakita ko. True. Okay, so ayan, feel free to drop your answer in there as we continue, and then later on, tingnan natin kung true nga ba or false. So after the presentation, masasagot natin siya. Okay, so as I mentioned, we'll be talking about inclusion. So when we speak of inclusion, what are the things that come to our mind? So first one, education for all. Regardless of your abilities or disabilities, it's education for all. Ayan. Next one is the least restrictive environment. Ito, very common. Lagi natin siyang naririnig, lalo na sa field of special education. So we will try to delve on that later. And then, supplementary aids and services. So what are the things that we provide our learners? What are the services that we give them? So this includes like reading, math, daily life skills. So ayan. And then lastly, accommodations and modifications. Na ito, lagi din natin siyang ginagamit, especially when we're doing IEPs. So start tayo sa accommodations and modifications. So what's the difference? So when we speak of accommodation, these are the changes that we do or implement in the classroom to accommodate how a student learns a material or how they are tested. So for example, you have a student in your class and the child needs to be like close to the point of instruction. That's how you accommodate the child. If the child has difficulty seeing what's on the board, so pwedeng ilapit niyo siya sa inyo, or you can use like a bigger text, or if there's a child who has visual impairment, then you can use Braille. So that's one way of accommodating the child. And
Dapat wala na yung, ito may mga 7, 2, 2, yung mga, dapat mawala yung mga numbers na baka-bakahin mo na dapat ang mag-continue sa wisdom.
okay, let's go back. Sorry.
Hey,
Accommodation does not
dalawa dito,
talk about how we accommodate the child in the classroom, but also how they are tested. So for example, there are students who need like small group when they're testing. There are students who need like one-on-one when they're testing kasi madali silang ma-distract, or maybe behavioral issues. That's why they
Hindi siya nagsabi.
So that's why we do one-on-one testing. Okay, so how they're tested. So some of them, they use text-to-speech. Some of them, they use a scribe when they're testing. So that's how we accommodate. Now, modification changes what a student is taught or expected to learn. So for example, I have a 5th grade student na sa general education classroom siya, or like for example, 5th grade na yung base sa edad, but then he reads at the 1st grade level. So we modify the curriculum. So for example, we are talking or teaching the child about story elements. Who are the characters, the setting, the plot. So when we modify, we will teach the same content but using a lower level of text to modify, kasi 5th grade siya pero 1st grade yung reading level. So we may use like a 1st grade text, but we will also talk about the character, the setting, the plot. So that's one way of modification. Okay. And meron naman na mga bata, like for example, they are learning, supposedly sa grade level nila, they should be multiplying 3-digit by 2-digit numbers. And they can't do that. So we modify, we teach them the basics of multiplication. That's how we modify. And to close up about accommodations and modifications, both are beneficial when properly, and this is my favorite word, consistently implemented. Because most of the time, especially if the child transfers from a resource center to a gen ed classroom, yung consistency nawawala. One teacher or the SPED may apply it, but then the general education teacher may not apply it. So consistency is the key. So ayan. Now, let's talk about least restrictive environment. When we talk about least restrictive environment, it's not just the physical classroom. It's not just, oh, okay, dalhin natin to sa SPED classroom, o kaya, oh, dalhin natin to sa Gen Ed classroom. Hindi lang siya nako-confine dapat sa 4 walls or sa physical building. But it talks about the whole services that we offer our kids or our learners. So, I mentioned here the 4 least restrictive environments. So first is the Gen Ed classroom, the resource classroom, self-contained classroom, and a specialized program outside school. So we'll talk about them as we go. So let's talk first about the general education classroom, which dito talaga nangyayari yung inclusion. So when we talk about Gen Ed classroom, this classroom has or follows the state standard-based curriculum na tinuturo ng general education teacher. So there will be co-teaching with a special education teacher or a multilingual teacher depending on the need of the classroom or depending on the needs of the students in the classroom. So here we implement accommodations, okay? So now, Teacher Live, you're talking about co-teaching. So what is co-teaching? So dito na papasok yung strategies and approaches natin. And I want to share this with you because this has been really helpful. Ngayon, we are in the phase of doing face-to-face instruction. So may pasok ako mamaya-maya. But then I know that you are doing online learning ngayon. So we'll try to contextualize how to do co-teaching using the online platforms. So co-teaching models, it came from Cook and Friends. So they did the research and this is the result. So nagawa nila yung co-teaching models. So the first one is one teach, one observe. Okay, one teach, one observe. As you can see, there's one teacher and then the other teacher just observes what's happening in the classroom. This is my least favorite of the co-teaching models kasi yung burden, sorry for the word, hindi burden, but the responsibility of teaching is nasa teacher. So siya yung nasa main teacher, nasa gen ed teacher, and the other one just observes what's happening. The observer can take down notes and then pwede siyang magbigay ng feedback later sa teacher. Pero dito hindi masyadong na-utilize yung extra teacher sa classroom. Okay, that's why it's one of my least favorite. So the second one is teaching, station teaching. Ito isa sa mga favorite ko, wherein we group the classroom or the students in the classroom in 3 or 4 groups, and then the teacher can rotate or the students can rotate. Each station will have different activities. So for example, we are doing we usually do this in our guided reading group. So merong group, sometimes we group them according to their levels or their reading levels. And like one teacher is working with one group with a different reading level, for example, 5th grade, so 5th grade sila, and then I'm dealing with students who are reading in 1st grade level. The other stations could be doing reading like books talaga, yung tangible na books, or the others are doing like reading from Epic or from websites. So yan yung station teaching, one of my favorites. Then the next one is parallel teaching. This is also good kasi lalo na I think sa Pilipinas this will work, especially we have like bigger class sizes, so we can divide the class. There will be 2, so pwedeng left tapos right, and then one teacher will be on both sides. They will be teaching the same content. So yung po dapat nating tandaan, parallel teaching, same content, we're just dividing the class para mas yung student-teacher ratio will be better. Then the next one is alternative teaching. So this one, we do this as well. Usually I take students who need more support before they go into the main lesson. So the gen ed teacher may be teaching like preliminary concepts about the topic, and I pull out my students who needs more support. Like for example, unlocking of the vocabulary terms, or I can do spiral review. Like for example, kung math naman, before sila multiply ng numbers, I review addition facts, then multiplication facts. So tinatry nating mag-review para ma-prepare sila for the lesson of multiplication. So that's alternative teaching. You divide the class, one bigger group, and then mas preferably smaller group so that you can do like a review or preparing them for the actual lesson. And then the next one is team teaching. Isa din sa favorite ko. This one is a bit challenging, but it's really good, especially if you have good interpersonal relationship with your co-teacher. Kasi it's like you're finishing each other's sentences. So nakita ng mga bata na they can learn from both of you. They see you as parang authority in the classroom. And then, but this one involves like careful planning. So kailan papasok yung teacher, ano yung part ng kanya, alin yung part na sa'yo. And ayun, mas maraming input na nabibigay sa mga bata. And then the kids can also share. So there are 2 teachers in the classroom. And then, the next one teach, one assist. So ito, medyo hindi ko rin ganun ka-favorite. Siguro mapapansin niyo siguro active lang din ako sa classroom, kaya ganun. So there's the main teacher or the gen ed teacher, and then the other one can assist. Okay, if there's a learner who needs like extra help, so you can go closer, okay, then give him like other instructions, or like you can guide the child how to start the work. So basically assisting. So that's that co-teaching models in action sa face-to-face instruction. Now, you could also be questioning, paano yan gagawin if we are in e-learning or like virtual, using the virtual platforms? So, likwin ko, gumawa siya ng co-teaching models and inadapt niya to accommodate the current need. So first one, balik tayo, one teach, one observe. So you can have one Google Meet or one Zoom meeting, and then yung isa nag-observe lang, tinitingnan niya anong behaviors ng mga bata, and then maybe she could provide feedback to the main teacher. Oh, this child seemed, parang ito parang hindi nakikinig sa'yo, baka gusto nating mag-consult sa kanya after the class, we can do a follow-up at home. So, yan po siya. Then the next one is station teaching. So this one, we utilize the breakout room. So alam ko, through Kaagapay, they provided trainings on this as well. So we utilize breakout sessions para one teacher teaches the bigger the group, one group, and then the other one can check on other groups. So nagro-rotate lang din to. So others can have like different activities while they are offline, or yung station, isang station, not necessarily online siya. Pwedeng they can read at home, read a book at home, and then when they go online, they can talk about what they read. So, depende sa lesson. So, station teaching. And then we have parallel teaching. So, there will be 2 Zoom meetings or Google Meet meetings. So, one, but both of them will be discussing the exact same thing. So, that's how we do parallel teaching. Basically, katulad lang siya ng parallel teaching in person, but then you're using Google Meet or like video platforms. So next one is alternative teaching. So same thing, main group will be for the teacher, and then there will be a breakout room to do spiral review to prepare these students to join the main group. And then we also have the team teaching. So there will be one Google Meet or Zoom, and then the 2 teachers will be there, the kids will be there, they will all be interacting with each other, and both teachers will be teaching the content. And then lastly, one teach, one assist. So one teacher is teaching, the other one can be monitoring the work of the students. So the teacher who assists can check, okay, this child has difficulty understanding the concepts here. Maybe you can like reiterate it or ituro natin ng ibang way. So nagbibigay lang siya ng feedback sa main teacher. Okay. Now, for resource classrooms, here's the scenario. So we do pull-out services by the special education teacher. So basically, the children are in Gen Ed, but then we know from their assessment that, okay, he needs more services for reading. So I pull them out, I take them to my classroom, and I teach them one-on-one or in small group. So this one is skill-based teaching based on the IEP. So for example, he is in 5th grade, but reading at a 3rd grade level. So what are the skills? Ano ba? Decoding skills ba? Ang kailangan niya, reading comprehension skills ba, ang kailangan namin i-work on, so that when they go back to the classroom, they're able to use what we are training them on or what we're working with them in the special education classroom in the Gen Ed classroom. Okay, so same thing. Ito yung sabi kong consistency. Whatever accommodation they have in the classroom, I will also implement that in the resource classroom. So if in the classroom they need to be seated close to the point of instruction, then the child should be seated like close to me when we are doing one-on-one or small group instruction. Okay, and this is very important, progress monitoring. We have to know, we have to track how the children or how our students are progressing. It's very important that we set our schedule. Like I do progress monitoring every 2 weeks. So naka-schedule na yan. So every 2 weeks, they know, and the students know that, okay, Ms. Castillo will ask me to read a text, and then she'll ask me comprehension questions. So progress monitoring, consistency. Okay, now in a self-contained classroom, here, ang main responsible for teaching the children is the special education teacher. This one will be a smaller class size. Here, ang maximum namin is 15. Meron na ring teacher aid na kasama yon. And then here, we implement accommodations as well, and we do curricular modifications. So the self-contained classroom in here, for example, sa school ko, we have 2 self-contained classrooms. One, multicat sila pareho. So the first one caters from K5 until 2nd or 3rd grade, and the other one, high-end ng 3rd grade to 5th grade naman. So students who fit on those classrooms are placed in the self-contained classroom. So skill-based, so this is along with the curricular modifications. They may be in 5th grade but reading a very low, they're having a very low reading level, so nandun sila. And the teachers in a self-contained classroom work on that with the students. Okay. We do mainstreaming in related arts, recess, and lunch. When I say mainstreaming, we take the students who, for example, in my self-contained classroom, for example, I have 15 students. 5 of them are 5th graders, 5 of them are in 4th grade, and 5 of them are in 3rd grade. So during related arts, they go to different teachers, to different gen ed classes, so that they get to socialize with their peers, learn with their peers, or learn with their age group. Okay. Also in recess and lunch, so that to facilitate or foster social interaction and yeah, to build their social skills basically with their same age peers. Okay. Now, we also have this specialized program outside the school. So when we talk about this, they are mostly handled by specialized providers, depende sa need ng bata. So it could be an individualized, most of the time it's individualized, especially if it's homeschooling or hospital programs, depende sa condition ng bata. And they can have small group for private schools. So again, it's very important to implement the accommodations, curriculum modifications if needed. So for example, sino ba yung pumapasok dito? So for example, we have a student na naging homebound because the child got involved in vehicular accident. So cognitive-wise, he's okay, but then dahil sa current situation ng katawan niya, kailangan niyang ma-homeschool. So ito ay isang individualized. There's no need for curricular modifications, but then we can add accommodations so that he will learn best. Okay, for example, for PE, kung ganun yung condition niya, of course, we will not ask the child to, okay, run or do these exercises, right? So, ayan, specialized program outside school. So like what I mentioned, it could be skill-based or curriculum-based, depende sa need ng bata. And it's catered in private schools, residences, and then hospitals. So example ng hospital is, for example, a child has cancer. So of course, cancer should not stop the child from learning. So hanggat kaya, we provide education to them. Okay. So yun po. And then now, ito na yung sinasabi ko, what are the challenges? So when we speak of challenges, ito talaga, when we suddenly shift, so we only had like 2 days from face-to-face na biglang, okay, teachers, you have to do your lesson plans, we have to plan ahead because we will be in lockdown starting tomorrow. So we only had actually 2 days. So first day is parang, it's for the students, parang break time nila. But the teachers work so hard to put everything into like, going virtual lahat. So, first one na naging challenge namin is connectivity. Not, hindi porke nasa Amerika, okay na lagi yung connection. So, we have students who don't have access to internet facility or network. So, yan, isa sa pinaka-challenge. And then later, I'll discuss how we went about it. So next one is schedule. Of course, as a SPED teacher, actually, to be honest, I cater from K5 until 5th grade. So scheduling with those teachers that I work with is talagang mahirap. And sa end naman ng mga bata, they have to attend to a gen ed class, they have to attend to my class. So medyo nakakalito siya. And then nakakapagod din humarap sa computer like maghapon. So kailangan ma-settle yung schedule. So isa yan sa naging challenge namin. And then, of course, parent and student technology proficiency. So we have parents and students who are not really adept with using the computer. So they have Chromebooks. Each child will have a Chromebook or an iPad. But then, yung mga bata alam nila, lalo na pag games. But then, like, when it comes to educational sites or like, okay, they have to do a Kahoot. They have to do a Flipgrid. So medyo nangangapa sila. And the sad thing is that we have parents who are also not equipped to like help the child to access stuff in the Google Classroom or in the learning platforms that we have. So, isa yun sa naging challenge namin. And then, next one, parental involvement. So, though nagkaroon ng lockdown, we still had parents who had to work. So, medyo mababa yung parental involvement namin. Or yung ibang parents, they're just scared kasi nga, hindi nila alam anong gagawin. Na parang, hindi, you just attend the Google Meet with your teacher. Ayaw nila ma-involve agad kasi hindi sila comfortable using technology. So, medyo mababa yung parental involvement namin. And then, of course, language barrier. We have a big number of students who are Spanish speaking. So minsan nalilito sila sa akin because I'm not, hindi ako American, mukha akong Hispanic but I don't speak Spanish. So naging challenge yun. Some parents, when they look at me, makita nila akong online, magsasalita na sila ng Spanish, but then ayun, I'm always sad na i-break yung heart na no habla Espanyol, I'm sorry, ayan, yun lang nakabisado ko. And then, of course, student motivation. Kasi when they are faced with their computers, they can access different games. So, minsan motivated sila sa games, but then when it's their turn to do actual schoolwork, less na yung motivation, medyo tinatamad na, ayan. So, tsaka na sa bahay. So, alam mo, mas relaxed. They have their time to like play with their siblings, ganun. They have time to eat whenever they want. So, medyo mababa yung student motivation natin. But then, teachers, hahayaan ba natin itong challenges na to na itigil tayo? Of course not. So, we came up with solutions para maging matuloy yung education for our learners. So, first one, and I'm very thankful for this, district hotspots and internet provider tie-ups. So, I'm very lucky to be in a district na talagang nag-provide sila ng hotspots. And then this is a personal experience, I have one student na wala talaga silang internet connection. And the parent told me na, I can't afford to parang apply for an internet connection. What do I do? Tapos so sumulat ako, kinausap ko yung principal, and then the principal told me, okay, we'll connect with the district and then hopefully they'll provide hotspots. So probably in a week's time, nakabit na yung hotspot, nabigyan ng hotspot yung bata. So hindi lang siya isang case, pero marami ring cases na nabigyan ng hotspots. And then yung mga school buses, and whenever students go to a site malapit sa school kasi may sasakyan naman sila, pupunta lang sila sa school area, they can access internet from the school or from school buses kasi may internet connection din yung mga school bus. And then, I'm very happy kasi nagkaroon ng program during the lockdown na parang may isang network dito, like for example, sa Philippines Globe, they said, okay, we will provide free internet access for 60 days to any family who has a student in the elementary, middle school, or high school. So, yun nakakatawa, nakapag-tie up yung mga internet providers. And then the next one, of course, papayag ba tayo? Kung wala silang internet connection, papayag ba tayo na wala silang gagawin sa bahay? Or hindi ba tutigil na yung learning nila? Of course not. So we do modular. So sometimes there are parents who parang worked in offices, so nakapag-online sila and they can print from their office. And then as teachers, what we did for those families who can't really have or print on their own, we printed the modules for them. And then, ayun, pinick up nilang nila sa schools. And then we had contingency planning. This is very important, especially for children with IEP. As a SPED teacher, you have to look forward. Ano bang kailangan? Paano ko matutuloy yung instructions sa mga estudyante ko kapag nag-lockdown ng 1 week, kapag nag-lockdown ng matagalan, or pag nag-face-to-face na. So, contingency planning is the key. So you have to decide, you have to coordinate with the parents. Okay, kapag nag-lockdown ng 1 week, ito yung mga goals na i-work on natin through Google Meet or through consultation with you over the phone. So, ayan. Or kapag long-term naman, okay, kailangan natin i-work on lahat ng goals. Kasi like for example, behavioral goals, it's so hard to work on behavioral goals ng online. So, yung mga goals na yun, medyo hindi namin siya wino-work on, parang pahapyaw lang with the parents. Okay, check his behavior, parang note nyo lang kung anong behavior niya. Okay, we'll focus on reading and math kasi ito yung mas madaling magawa ng bata sa bahay with your help. So, ayan. And then we also have parental guidance and consultations like what I mentioned. We talk to parents, we communicate with parents a lot kapag nag-lockdown. So they can reach us through text, they can reach us through call, through email. Ayan. So far, wala namang pumunta sa bahay para magtanong. But then, ayun, text, I'm always open for texting. Tsaka, as SPED teacher, it was my responsibility to call them every day. So 1 in the morning to set them up. Okay, so ito yung schedule natin for today. And then in the afternoon. And yun nga yung challenge. So it takes dedication talaga for teachers to like extend. Kasi minsan, di ba, pag sabi, 4 o'clock na dapat stop na ako mag-work. And I know sa Pilipinas, ganito tayo, we extend for free dahil mahal natin yung mga estudyante natin. So, the latest that I had, yung phone call with the parent was 9:30 p.m. So, ayan. And there's a funny story. There's one parent na araw-araw ko siyang tinatawagan. And then one weekend, he called me up and then, hey, is this the plumber? Where are you? So, ayun, napagkamalan akong tubero. Pero, I'm happy kasi nakapag-communicate siya sa akin. So, ayan. And then, of course, like what I mentioned, isa sa challenge namin is the language barrier. So, we have interpreters in the school and then we utilize language line. So, language line is like, fashion call center kung saan they speak Spanish and they translate for us. And this is legal and approved by the district. It's very hard kasi lalo for special ed, we don't just talk to people to interpret what's in the IEP kasi violation yon. So, ayan. And then, ito, to increase motivation, we do online rewards and we mail rewards. So, salamat kay Amazon and for sure sa inyo dyan, merong salamat Lazada, salamat Shopee. So, online rewards just to keep our kids motivated. Okay, whenever, a child, Justin, you did all your homeworks for this week. Okay, so I'll give you 10 points. So, may class dojo. Tapos, they can, pag na-accumulate nila yung points, they can redeem a reward, parang free time to play, parang ganun. They can have like Google Meet with you. Like, kasi pag online, pag face-to-face kami, students who are performing really well, they have an option to have a lunch with the teacher or their friend. So, pwede kayong mag-virtual lunch, ganyan, eat together. And then, I think very common, we mail rewards like Student of the Week, mga ganyan. And then, pinaka-importante, in everything you do, always document contacts with parents kasi this is how you prove that you're providing services to them. I'm not sure kung gaano kahigpit ang Pilipinas when it comes to like providing support. But here, kapag na-realize ng parent, teka, parang itong teacher nito hindi ako kinokontak about my child. Hindi niya pinoprovide yung support. So they can go to court with that. Ayan, kasi it's a right of the child to get services, especially yan. Ayan, parents as advocates. I've been talking so much about parents and why? Because parents are our advocates. They provide a critical input about the child's development, family history, more information about the condition of the child. So sa kanila natin yun makukuha. And then they can offer insights on child's learning. So for example, I noticed, okay, this child is very sleepy in class. Ano kayang nangyayari? Ano kaya, is it avoidance? Kulang ba siya sa tulog? Then you can call the parents, bakit po kaya ganito yung behavior niya sa classroom? And then the parent can communicate with you and tell you, okay, this is what's happening. So, nag-work ako ng gabi and then nauiwan sila with my husband, siguro ganun, yung bata, naglalaro, ayan. So, when we get that information, we can work on with the child, okay? So, yan, pwede kayo mag-behavioral contract with the child. Okay, you have to sleep early. Once you sleep early, you get a reward pag hindi ka natutulog sa klase ko. So, mga ganun. And then, dahil advocate sila, we have to encourage parents to do these things, okay? First one, correspond with the IEP team. We have to tell the parents, hey, you are part of the learning of your child. You are an essential part. So without you, hindi natin mabibigay lahat ng services na kailangan ng bata. Hindi natin ma-maximize lahat. So your communication with us is very crucial and very important, and we value any information that you can give. When you tell that to the parents, they feel na, ay, may say ako, ay mahalaga ako, ay may magagawa para sa anak ko. So always encourage them to correspond with you. And as teachers, correspond not just like, okay, medyo malikot siya ngayon. We can say, oh, you know what? So, today, he's reading, the class is reading a 4th grade level book, but your child, he was reading 1st grade level, but today he tried reading a 2nd grade level book. So, yun, medyo nakaka-boost sa magulang yun. No? Nakikita nila, ba't ko nga ba sinabi na, ba't ko ba in-emphasize na yung kaklase niya nagbabasa ng 4th grade, tapos siya, 1st grade, nagbasa lang ng 2nd grade. Make things a big deal for them. Kasi, kaya ko sinabi na, okay, the class is reading a 4th grade level so that they will know what's the expectation. Kasi sometimes if you tell them, oh, first grade level book yung binasa niya and now he's reading a second grade level. For them, okay na pala kasi nakabasa na siya ng second grade level. So it's like setting, okay, this is the expectation. This is what we're trying to reach. Okay, but now your child is making gains. Okay, so yun po yun. Then the next one, keep records. So whenever we had IEP meetings, we give copies of the evaluation report, of the IEP, everything that they signed, because it's their legal right. And for them, you have to encourage them to keep those records kasi when they transfer to a different school or a different district, they will ask for that so that matuloy-tuloy yung services para sa mga bata. Okay, next one. Learn more about their child's condition. It's not just, for example, sa diagnosis or sa educational report, nakalagay, oh, this child has autism. Okay, so yung magulang, okay, may autism yung anak ko. What's next? What can your child do? Ano yung mga kailangan niyang gawin? What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities that for your child? So, dapat medyo aware yung magulang doon so they know what else they can do at home to help you. So, ayan. And yun, part na rin ng pagiging advocate. And then, along with that, we encourage them to observe and take notes. So, for example, there's a change in sleeping pattern. There's a change in behavior when a stimulus is presented. So, take note and then balik tayo sa number 1, correspond with your IEP team. If you notice something at home, I strongly encourage you to let me know so that we can both work hand in hand for to help our child or kung ano man yun, bigyan natin ng solution. Or if it's something good, we can both celebrate it. So for example, nakita ng magulang, nagbabasa yung anak ko ng libro. I'll tell my special ed. So, teacher, my child is reading a book. Oh, that's good. So when the child goes to my session, hey, your mom told me that you were reading the book at home. So can you tell me about it? And if the child tells me about the book, oh, that's great. You did a great job in reading. I want you to continue that, okay? So that's home-school relationship ties. Yan. So yan, to answer our question, inclusion, so here, yung meme, wait, inclusion is not simply about physical proximity. So tinanong ko, diba, if putting gen ed students with with learners with special needs in one classroom, is that inclusion? So kind of tricky, but I feel it's a no. It's not just the classroom. All the services should be in place. Choosing what's the best for our child. And here, sabi nga, it is about intentionally planning for the success of all students. So we include them. Wala tayo sa isang classroom. Let's look at it as an open field with all of the students in there. Okay, and then making each learner grow and be the best that they can be. So, yan po. So in line with that, I want you to ask yourself, okay, what is my why? What is your why? So in special education, ano nga ba yung why natin? To develop, for our students to develop to their full potential. Yun naman talaga yung main advocacy or goal natin, di ba? To make them functional, independent, and productive citizens. So it's not necessarily doing a specific skill or like, for example, na yung bata maging doktor, maging teacher, or what. But we want them to reach their maximum potential, to be fully functional on their own, and to be productive, to be able to contribute to society in whatever way they can. So again, what is your why? And habol na question, and what will you do for it? So you know your why. What are you willing to do for that? Are you willing to work with other teachers for that, to make co-teaching successful, or like use co-teaching in your classroom? What will you do for it? And I know as Filipinos, we are very resilient and we have big hearts, and we would want to do everything for our kids to make them learn and be the best that they can be. So thank you very much. So if you have questions, just email me. If you, I can give a copy of the co-teaching models to Teacher Franco, and then he can share it to the viewers. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Teacher
Yes. Yes naman.
Glay.
Okay. Thank you, Teacher Glay. And we'll we'll entertain some questions for Teacher Glay later on, okay? Because we'll have to maximize the time for second speaker for today, okay? Because she has like a scheduled meeting no right after this webinar. No? So thank you ba maraming salamat Teacher Glay for that very interesting no on the ground sharing Teacher Pao na
Yes.
talaga yung nakita
Agree.
natin kanina or narinig natin are the things that's actually being practiced, being done and ano no, implemented kay by Teacher Glay in her school. Kaya lang siguro Teacher paano kailangan nating i-contextualize ulit na iba yung bansa ni Teacher Glay, no? She's
Yes.
actually based
Yes.
now in the US, okay? Once she was in the UAE, pero ngayon nasa
Yes.
US, okay? Pero both are foreign context, okay? Pero, Teacher Pao, no? Hindi natin pwedeng sabihin na, ay, hindi pala applicable lahat yan dito kasi nasa
Mm-hmm.
ibang bansa tayo. Pero, huwag natin kalimutan na kahit naman siyempre definitely may impact yung resources, tsaka yung context, yung culture. Much of the things that Teacher Glay actually shared are things that actually can be done in our country. It's just a matter of like fine-tuning. It's a matter of like looking at how we can put it into our context, can use them. That's the reason why we asked Teacher Glay no, precisely to share that. No? At first, actually, Teacher Pao, very hesitant si Teacher Glay mag-share. Okay? Kasi sabi niya, ano naman i-share ko kung ang context ko ay ibang bansa? Precisely, we wanted to also learn because other countries in terms of inclusion have already progressed way so better and far from how we are doing inclusion in the Philippines. Okay, so in a way, we'd like to model. Okay, we don't necessarily want to copy,
Yes.
but we'd
Correct.
like to model. Yes, no. So how about you, Teacher Pao? Insights, okay, before we
Actually,
proceed to
for
our
me,
second speaker.
yeah. Yeah, actually, before we proceed to the next one, I'd just like to share my thought that yes, at some point when I was listening to Teacher Glay, I was thinking, um, this might not be applicable to our situation, but the way that she has presented specific strategies, I can even see in the chat box that
Yes.
the principles can actually be applied here, maybe in a different way, but the principles is still applicable, no? Even with our viewers, they agree with the principles presented with Teacher Glide. No internet connection is also something that is happening, no? Even abroad. So I think it's a good model. So I agree with you. It's really about modeling it
Yes.
and hoping, no, and hoping that something will change, or we can improve on this. Yes.
Yes, no. Ang ganda ng mga insights natin sa chat, no. We'll bigyan ng pansin natin
Yes.
yan mamaya, no. But siguro before tayo mag-proceed sa next speaker natin, Teacher Pao, gusto ko lang din i-emphasize yung sinabi ni Teacher Glay kanina na it's not just the classroom. Okay, putting together your students, no, with other students with learning abilities, okay, does not make it inclusion. Okay,
Yes.
inclusion means deliberately designing and attending to the needs of your students in terms of their learning abilities. Okay, yun
Yes,
yung
correct.
when we talk about inclusion. Okay. So, Teacher Pao, let's proceed to our next speaker for today, which will be talking about, in a general sense, inclusion, as well as in the context of the Philippines now. Okay, what we are doing, what we're supposed to be doing, and what has been done so far in terms of inclusion in the Philippines.
All right. So it's actually my privilege to introduce her again for the second time. Maybe you've seen her in one
Yes.
of our events, no? On a different note. But allow me to present to you our next speaker, Teacher Therese Bustos, who is an expert in special and inclusive education research. Her work includes research on the incorporation of disability in the conditional cash transfer program, baseline studies on disability in indigenous and Muslim communities, and the assessment of readiness of DepEd schools to provide services for children with disabilities in marginalized communities. She was formerly the Dean of the University of the Philippines College of Education and currently serves as the Philippine Director of the Assessment Curriculum Technology Research Center and the System Director of Ugnayan ng Pahinungod. She chairs the Technical Committee on Special Education and is a member of the Technical Panel on Teacher Education of the Commission of Higher Education. Mga kaagapay, let's all welcome Dr. Marie Therese A. P. Bustos. Good afternoon,
Okay.
please.
Magandang hapon, magandang gabi na yata sa inyong lahat. So thank you very much for inviting me. And so I'll be building on what Teacher Glay spoke about. But seriously, I am so proud to announce I was once part of the lives of Pau, Teacher Franco, Teacher Glay. And I think Keith is also in the chat box. I was their former teacher when I was a lot younger and when they were a lot younger. But I was so proud to say that I've gone full circle. There comes a point in your life when seriously you learn from your students, as I have learned from Teacher Glay today. Thank you, Glay, for sharing about the co-teaching models and sharing the comparisons uh, with how we do it for e-learning. Okay, so what I'm going to do, of course, syempre, no, with tutorial, I'm going to share my slides.
Yes.
Yeah, we are so
Okay.
excited to see you,
Ay,
Teacher Therese. We are so
Hello,
blessed to
Teacher
have you
Therese.
here.
Good afternoon.
hi!
So,
Oo.
wh-
Magandang
while Teacher Ther-
hapon.
while
Well,
Teacher Therese
Teacher
is preparing
Therese.
the Yes, Teacher Therese is preparing the presentation. Yes, indeed, no. We are all products of Teacher Therese. So where we are right now and what we're doing are all products of all the things that she did for us, no, back in college. Okay, she was also our advisor in our organization, Teacher Pau, in UPSEC, in UP. So Teacher Therese, your presentation is now online
Can you
right
see
here.
my presentation?
Yes, it's
Okay.
already
Yes, you can. And so this means I need to present. Tingnan
yes,
nyo,
ma'am.
I see, this is one example of my students telling me what to do. Okay. Maraming
Good luck.
salamat. So,
Good luck,
so
Teacher
can you see
Therese.
it? So can you see it?
Yes,
Oh, great.
yes.
So, my talk is about making sense of inclusion here in the Philippines. You know, the great thing about what Glay discussed earlier was that, you know, some of the issues that they have in the US are also the same issues that we have. Of course, there are some areas where they are really ahead, but definitely I take comfort in knowing that some of your problems are still our problems here in the Philippines. Okay. So so let me talk about legislation first. Teacher Glay talked about the least restrictive environment. And you know, the least restrictive environment is part of an American law. It doesn't exist in Philippine law. And I think that is something that I need to stress to everybody because I've seen presentations before where people would talk about least restrictive environment as if that exists here in the Philippines. Yes, of course, we want that. However, our legislation has nothing on least restrictive environment. Much of what Teacher Glide shared has to do with their law, and there are two in particular, no? Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, where you have LRE under that law. They also have the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, for us here who live in the Philippines, there are two most prominent pieces of legislation that guide our practice in relation to inclusion. Well, back in the 1990s, it was the Magna Carta for Persons with Disabilities, or RA 7277. But in 2006, our country signed the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And what our Congress did was to make that part of our law when it ratified CRPD. What is interesting is that the Philippines has CRPD, but the US did not sign the CRPD because, according to them, they have good legislation to already support education for Americans with disabilities. Okay, so I hope that is clear that I will not be talking about the least restrictive environment, but there is a law that is actually coming out quite soon, and I'm just hoping that it will be released soon. The Senate um, was able to pass a bill that institutes support services for learners with disabilities in support of inclusive education. The House of Representatives also did that. And so, what is currently ongoing is that there is a harmonization process where they are putting together the Senate version, Senate Bill number 1907, as well as House Bill number 8080. And when these two are harmonized, we are hoping to come up with a law that will provide support services for learners with disabilities. And part of this would be support in the form of additional personnel in schools so that we can have something similar to what Teacher Glide talked about in her co-teaching models. And so, since that law has not been passed yet, not signed by the president, this is the law that we have, which is the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So that particular law talks about the inclusive education system and that persons with disabilities have a right to be in general education. So it does not talk about the least restrictive environment, but it talks about persons with disabilities, learners with disabilities having access to the regular classroom. And there are two ways by which this is going to be addressed. Number one is reasonable accommodation, and that will be defined later. And then the second one is universal design. So I'll talk more about those in a bit. So when we talk about universal design, this is an idea that did not start in education. It actually started in architecture, and it is this concept that says that when we design products, environments, buildings, programs, and services, that they need to be usable by all people. And so we're not pushing for a one size fits all. We recognize that people are different from each other. But when we think of something, we think about the users of a particular thing. So if it's a building, what types of people can enter a building? And in our case, since we're in education, we're looking at universal design for learning. I'm pretty sure that this is nothing new to you. I believe that many of the inset trainings have covered this already. But universal design for learning, at least, is gaining acceptability here in the Philippines. While we're not able to provide yet for all of the things that were mentioned by Glai, at least from the Department of Education, there's a strong move to look into universal design for learning. So when we say universal design for learning, we're not just focusing on learners with disabilities because UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is for all types of learners. It's not for special ed, but it is a way of thinking that makes sure that whenever we teach, whenever we face our classes, that we are aware of three important brain networks that are operationalized. First, for us to be able to learn, diba? So according to Vygotsky, for us to be able to learn, you need to be able to perceive whatever it is that's being taught. And so the student has to be able to see something, hear something. And so if a person cannot hear or cannot see, how else will that person perceive the information that you are providing? So we make sure that whatever it is that we're teaching, we make sure that the person, the learner, is able to perceive whatever it is. So you will have some students who will have difficulties, who will have disabilities. And so our task is to make sure if he cannot see, so I'll have to think of other ways to make sure that he's able to perceive whatever it is that I'm teaching him. And in the same way, if a student cannot hear, so what would be other ways by which that student could hear or maybe see the information that I'm sharing? So the recognition network is very important. Vygotsky also said that for us to be able to learn, we need to be able to engage. We need to be interested in whatever it is. And so by the attendance today, actually I'm surprised that there were many who are interested, no, in special education and inclusive education. So that means that particular interest, there is something there in you that responds to whatever it is that is being shared right now. And so, through different activities, we should be able to get people interested in something, get them involved. So that's why we would like to tap also the affective network. We also realize that people are different from each other. We can show what we know in different ways. And so we tap our strategic networks to be able to show people what we understood of a lesson. We so there will be different ways of expressing what we know. And when you consider this, all the three networks, so these three networks are very important. UDL is based on brain based research. And so, when I, as a teacher, enter my classroom, or even before I enter my classroom, and this is the general classroom, mind you, I need to be ready to address those three networks. So, so it's not enough to think of one way of presenting the information, because that one way can be there can be barriers to really perceiving that information coming from that. So kailangan talaga there are many ways of presenting the same information. In the same way that when you visit a place, you will see information that is posted on a wall, you will hear announcements on what is posted, you will even see some objects like tactile objects that will give you the same information. So what we want when we present our lessons is that we recognize that people have different ways of perceiving information. So some would like to see things, others would like to hear, others are very kinesthetic and tactile, so they really need to use their hands. And so as teachers, we make sure that we take care of all of those ways of presenting information. And we also said that because we are unique, there's not one way of showing people what we know. So, part of the UDL design, which we use for inclusion in general classrooms, is that we allow students to express what they know in different ways. So, hindi yun dekahon na isa lang paraan ang pag-express kung ano ang alam. And also, there are different ways also of motivating students' interest. There are some students who are innately interested in the things that we say. Okay, so that's one. But you will find also that there are some students who are not very interested in the things that we say, but because our activity is fun, then they will, well, give us their attention and do the activity. And so UDL, Universal Design, also believes that not all of us are motivated the same way and not all of us are interested in the same things. So actually, when we think about it, UDL is an acceptance of the differences that we all have, the uniqueness that we all have. Well, of course, it's easier said than done because when you go one on one, okay, maybe that's easy to think UDL. But when you're confronted with 30 students, 40 students, 50 students, and 60 students, and even more, then that is so difficult. Yes, it will entail some commitment really to think beyond the one size fits all. Hindi pwedeng isang activity lahat pare-pareho kasi iba-iba talaga tayo. And so I included this particular picture from Matteo Paganelli. Yan eh. And look at the saying in the middle. Real equality isn't possible if we don't celebrate our differences. And so Because the core of inclusion is the celebration of difference. Minsan iniisip natin, ano ba yung inclusion na pagsama-sama, pagsama-sama. But in reality, simpleng pagsasama-sama may not really be very inclusive. In fact, you can have problems when you try to put people together without creating an environment where your uniqueness is respected. And so, when we say that we will practice inclusion, we need to be aware of our own biases. I mean, each one of us, we have our own respective backgrounds, no? We have our own thoughts about our differences, about all of these things, no? But but we need to be very mindful of this. Why? Because if you look at the illustration, we have our own thoughts about gender, diba? And sometimes, because we're not careful, we can end up offending somebody by a joke that we've said about gender. Or we may be giving more people more opportunities to participate in some activities just because of gender, or maybe because of religion, maybe because of ability, maybe because of culture, etc. And so we need to be very mindful about where we're coming from. So I'm not saying that it's wrong to have your biases, but you need to be very mindful that they don't affect the way you relate, that we relate to each other. And this is why in the same slide, I am talking about bullying. Because in the research that we've done, one of the major problems in practicing inclusion is dealing with the problem of bullying. Because you're putting now different types of people together. And in this case, this particular talk is about differently able students. So we're looking at children of different abilities. And so sometimes, children can be very cruel, teasing each other about what they can do and what they cannot do. We also found in research that the overaged students are typically bullied by the younger ones. And so we need to be very mindful of what goes on in our classes, whether the classes are face to face or even during online learning. Because like my student teachers would still report that even when they have online learning, still they will find that children still tease each other. And not all children are able to handle that. And so, and then there are some teachers also who pay attention to all the teasing that goes on in class. There are other teachers who don't mind the teasing. And the problem is, we don't even know it, but we have children, we have learners who are deeply hurt and would prefer not to attend classes. And so we need to be very mindful of differences in our classes, but we need to celebrate those differences. And how do we do that? First, we really set an example by watching out for our own biases. Now, in DepEd, you will find that they practice zero reject policy. I mean, seriously, DepEd cannot reject any student. Now, and because it cannot reject any student, which is a good thing, you will find that there will be learners with disabilities who have medical reports with them or psychoeducational reports with them because they are diagnosed. In the learner information system, they are counted under those with disabilities like deaf and hard of hearing, which they would call hearing impairment, visual impairment, autism, intellectual disability, etc. They would be counted under diagnosed. But because of the zero reject policy, we also accept students. We accept students who don't have psychoeducational reports. And so they are classified as having with difficulties. And some of these difficulties are difficulty seeing, difficulty hearing, difficulty remembering, difficulty walking. And so, unlike in the US, where children are diagnosed or at least are being prepared, no, for diagnosis, here in the Philippines, it's not as easy. But because of our zero reject policy, we embrace all of those children with all of their differences, regardless of diagnosis or not. And so, as general practice for all general classrooms, good teaching, which is characterized by universal design for learning, has to be done for all learners. All learners talaga yan. Now, but at that level, we should be checking their sight, their vision, and also their hearing. You know, you have the Snellen chart. And I know because we've been working with Teach for the Philippines volunteers, and some of their tasks as public school teachers is to let their students read the Snellen chart. Oo, hindi yung school nurse. Wala kasing school nurse. So yung advisor yung gumagawa nun. Also, hearing has to be checked because for all we know, you don't have children with disabilities in class. Uh, all they need would be a pair of glasses, or maybe they just need to be seated in front of the class. They're not actually deaf. We thought, I remember there was a time when we thought that the student had learning disability, no, could not read. But he attended a class where they were 55 in that class. So it was in a school located in an urban area. The noise level in the whole school is really high. It's really loud. And so, he couldn't hear the teacher. Yun lang pala ang problema niya. Wala siyang learning disability. Ni wala nga siyang hearing loss. Hindi lang niya marinig yung teacher. Kasi I think nasa row 3 siya. So, he was seated far from the teacher and he couldn't hear the teacher. So, plain vision and hearing screening, which we can do, which community workers can do, can help us become more inclusive in our classes. So, we can address those like problems that students will have by merely checking vision and hearing. Now, again, the same law that covers us in the Philippines talks about reasonable accommodation. And these are things that we do, these are modifications that we do so that persons with disabilities can enjoy on equal basis with others their human right to education. The problem with reasonable accommodation is that reasonable accommodation is temporary. And we don't want it to be temporary because there are some children who would constantly need the accommodation that teacher Glai was talking about in her talk. And so our law says it will be reasonable. And by reasonable accommodation, these are temporary accommodations. But with better education planning, with better assessments, and with teachers who are more aware that learners with disabilities should be able to exercise their right to education, then we would be more willing to look into accommodations. So, okay, maybe I'm going to, well, no, I'll just talk about this briefly. Many of our students here in the Philippines are not diagnosed. But even if they're not diagnosed, it doesn't mean that we will send them away, that we will require a medical report. No. Again, the DepEd policy is zero reject. And so with whatever tools that we have, for example, some of you may be familiar with the early childhood care and development checklist because that is a screening tool that daycare workers administer. There are other screening tools that are used which could flag, which could tell us that maybe a child needs more assistance in a particular domain like language, communication, etc. Um, so just presenting this to show that you don't need to have a diagnosis of the condition to be able to respond to the educational needs of a child. So initially, before we refer someone to special ed, we will try our best to provide remedial classes, to provide tutorials, and to really do our best in our classes. However, if that doesn't work, then we may refer the child already for more assessments. And so maybe there are other things that have to be done, such as therapies. Now, the individualized education plan is so important. And let me explain to you. Remember, for us here in Metro Manila, even before COVID, we had some events already that took place, like when the Taal volcano erupted. So there was dust everywhere. So we had to suspend classes because the dust coming from Taal went, no? It was blown to as far as NCR. And so many of the classes were not meeting. And then teachers were so worried about what was going to happen. And for us in special education, like in UP, we were wondering, so why is that a problem? There's an individualized education plan. It will just mean um, operationalizing and implementing that plan at home. And what we found was that many children with disabilities enrolled in public schools don't have an IEP. So the goals have not been set. The strategies on how to meet those goals have not been written. How they will be graded has not been planned yet. And so teachers were freaking out. So what do we do? So after Taal, then came COVID. So we had a series of lockdowns again, and this became more and more of a problem. And so we had teachers, public school teachers approaching us. So how do we make individualized education plans? I mean, seriously, we were so surprised that there were no plans. We were treating classes as though we would treat um, classes for children without disabilities. We go ahead, we follow the curriculum guide. And so teachers were so pressured. Do I cover all the learning competencies? DepEd came up with the MELCs, the most essential learning competencies. So what do we do with them? So they didn't really know what to do. And it was all because at the onset, there were no individualized education plans. These are very, very important. And so here in the Philippines, you will find that there are some public schools who have IEPs. You will also find IEPs in private schools, but it is not mandated for, it's not mandated practice. And so I think it's very important that that particular document becomes part of our practice. And if the law is passed, the one I told you about, SBN 1907 and HBN 8080, it will require IEPs for learners with disabilities. Now, special education, I think we need to be very aware, is a service. It is not a room. It is not a center. It is a service. And it is a service that can be given inside the classroom. And that is the beauty presented by the presentation of Teacher Glai earlier. That you have teachers co-teaching, gen ed teachers and special education teachers co-teaching. Now, we have seen that in private schools. Unfortunately, it is not common practice because there are no plantilla positions for having like two teachers handle a particular class. In some LGUs, local government units, some are quite proactive. What they would do is to hire a teacher aide or a shadow teacher to assist the general education teacher. I don't know if in your school you're able to do that, but there are some local government units who would pay for the salary of that teacher. It's not DepEd paying for the salary of that assistant teacher. And so there are many things that we need to fix in the Philippines, but we are getting there. We're getting there. And so, um, okay, so it's 6:37. That's right. Okay. And so earlier, Teacher Glai talked about accommodations and modifications. And so when we talk about accommodations and modifications, um, if you will change the what is to be learned, whether what is to be learned or what will be tested, that is considered a modification. However, if you are just going to change the sequence of the lessons, the manner by which you will teach a lesson, if you will just change the how, that is an accommodation. I think we need to be very clear on what is expected. So we don't continually modify things. So anything that we do in our classes, whether we accommodate or we modify, that has to be supported by something that we did. For example, like maybe in some assessments, you know that a child cannot handle the competency for the grade level. And so you will change it, make it a bit lower. So that's a change already in the what. However, there can also be just changes in the how. So for example, I had a student who had dyslexia, but he was my student in science. And while reading was so important, the science grade was not based on my student's ability to read, but his ability to understand scientific concepts. And so his exams were read to him. They were read to him because reading in that instance was just an access skill, meaning the target skill, for example, the target skill is to explain the process of photosynthesis. So I'm not going to change that skill. I'm not going to modify it. I'm going to keep it as that the child should be able to explain the process of photosynthesis. However, the student has reading disability, cannot read. Now, should his reading disability prevent him from being able to explain the process of photosynthesis? Well, if I was going to force the issue and let him write it, read the test and write his answers, then he will not be able to show his understanding of photosynthesis. But what we did was to accommodate him, meaning, okay, we got somebody to read the test for him and he answered the test orally. Now, it was not a problem because reading was just an access skill. It was the access skill to be able to demonstrate the target skill. And so for us teachers, we need to be able to distinguish between the access skill and the target skill. Because many times we will say, ay, unfair naman yan. Bakit mo pinapabayaan gumamit ng calculator? Or bakit mo pinapabayaan na hindi nagsusulat, dinidictate lang niya yung answer niya? Ina-allow namin yun kasi na-distinguish namin kung ano yung access skill at kung ano yung target skill. So we maintain the target skill, but we accommodate. We give accommodation when it is the access skill that is concerned. Okay. We also use differentiated instruction. Again, because it's zero reject policy, you will find that you will have very smart kids in your class as having slow kids. So what will you do? I think you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, and maybe the students can be focusing on one topic. Diba? You have, let's say, photosynthesis. But for the more advanced students in your class, you can target higher order skills, no? Higher order learning competencies on the same topic of photosynthesis, while for the ones who may be lagging behind, you may have more simpler activities for them, maybe focusing on the facts related to photosynthesis or understanding a part of it, but not necessarily analyzing it or even creating something about it. But this is a good way of having students share the same topic, same lesson, however, targeting that same lesson at different levels depending now on what they can do and what they cannot do. Okay, some final reminders. Okay, UDL. Universal Design of Learning is a given to all teachers, general ed teachers, regular teachers, receiving teachers, non-receiving teachers, special education teachers. It is a given. UDL is actually our commitment to celebrate differences. UDL is a mindset. Yung hindi lang isa ang naiisip mo, pero marami kang naiisip kasi tanggap mo na iba-iba ang tao. Okay, next. We need to be able to deal with bullying. You know, it is our country's shame that PISA reported, the OECD reported, of the 15-year-olds who took the PISA in 2018, 65% of them said that they had experiences of bullying, when the global average is 23%. So Filipino learners are complaining about bullying, and this is something that we need to be able to address if we want to be inclusive. The IEP, as I've said, the IEP will tell you to the extent to which you will use the K-12 curriculum. If a child does not have an IEP and is part of your class, and if classes have not started yet, please work on the IEP because this will simplify your life. It will tell you to what extent you will cover the curriculum or you will cover the MELCs. This will tell you how you will grade the child. Because many teachers and many receiving teachers are actually so pressured to have that child with disability in their class because there is no guidance given to them. The IEP is a very important document. So if you don't have it yet, please ask the special education coordinator in your school because this is something that you will need, especially now that we are all working from home. And so we need to be able to communicate clearly to parents what the goals are for the child. Work with parents. So this was stressed by Teacher Glai. You really need to have a good relationship with them and keep the lines open. Why? Because we're modular. We're not yet at that point where we can go fully online. And even when we go fully online, our gadgets are so small. Like in the classes that are conducted by our students, because we are working now with the division of Quezon City, this particular break, they couldn't see the students because many were using just their cell phones. And so to be able to communicate with a parent who sits with a child or with the lola or lolo, sister, brother, etc., whoever works with the child would be very ideal. So strive to have a good relationship with them and seriously refrain from judging. The pandemic has really affected us so negatively. Nakakapraning talaga siya. And I think while, yes, as teachers, tayo napapraning na, but can you imagine if you are the parent who needs to work with that child and you are not even a teacher, don't even have training to work with that child, with your own child. So let's be more forgiving and more patient with parents. And this is my last slide. You need to take care of yourself. You need to take care of yourself because your students need the best version of you. And so this would mean sleeping enough hours. This means taking breaks. This means feeding yourself. This means watching your favorite show when you need to watch a show. You need to take care of yourself because your students need you to be very patient, to be happy, to be loving. And it's difficult to be patient, happy, and loving when you're tired. So take good care of yourself. And so if you have questions, you can send me an email through this address. So thank you very much.
And thank you. Maraming salamat. Sorry. Maraming salamat, Teacher Therese. No? And we know that Teacher Therese has a schedule. So we're going to move right away to the presentation of our appreciation via our certificate of appreciation. So Teacher Therese, before you go, let us first present this certificate of appreciation for you and to Teacher Glay. Go ahead, Teacher Pau.
All right. So it is my honor to present the certificate to Dr. Marie Therese A.P. Bustos for sharing her knowledge and expertise in the recently concluded webinar entitled Strategies and Approaches in Mainstreaming Differently Abled Students, awarded today or dated back August 14, our original schedule,
That's fun.
to be signed by the administrators, Sir Jambi Santos, myself, Sir Jello Malyari, and of course, Franco Nicolo Adun. Thank you so much,
Thank
Teacher
you.
Therese. And of course, the
Thank
same
you.
citation is also given to Teacher Glyza Ellen May Castillo for sharing your thoughts and your expertise and your experience to us. Indeed, we are very, very blessed this
Yan.
afternoon.
Teacher Therese, before po we let you go and we go
Yeah.
so that you can attend your meeting, maybe like a message to our community, to the teachers, okay, who are going to mag-start po ang school year ulit sa September for most of our schools in the Philippines. So like message to our teachers, Teacher Therese, before you go.
Okay. Pasiyahin niyo mabuti ang inyong mga sarili habang break pa. Dahil pag nagsimula na, simula na naman. And so be kind to yourself. Seriously, be kind to yourself. If you need to spend on yourself, if you need time away from all of the people that are toxic, that affect you the wrong way, do it. Use this break to take care of yourself. And with the love that you show yourself, you will be able to show love to learners who really need that love too. Kaya, ganun talaga. Take care of yourself. Yun lang.
Maraming salamat, Teacher Therese. And with that, magpapaalam na po tayo kay Teacher Therese because meron pang engagement si Teacher Therese in
Oo.
another meeting.
Pasensya na, it's a DepEd meeting. Anyway, you know my email address. So if you need to
Yes.
ask me questions, please feel free to email me. So maraming salamat ulit. And thank you again for inviting me. Bye-bye.
Thank you po, Teacher Therese. Maraming salamat po. And we say goodbye now to Teacher Therese because she has to attend another meeting. Okay. So we'll now have our panel discussion. Okay.
Yes.
If you have other questions, insight siguro, or maybe questions to our one of our speakers now still here, Teacher Glay still here. Okay. Who can still entertain some of our questions. Okay. From our audience. Okay. So yan. Full of appreciation. By the way, meron tayong mistake sa certificate. It's Teacher Therese, Dr. Marie Therese AP Bustos. Okay? Baka lang po natin na Teacher Tere. Teacher Therese po talaga. Nagkamali lang ng konti sa certificates namin. Okay? So again, maraming salamat, teachers. We're now, before we have our evaluation, we still have around 10 minutes, okay, for some discussion. Okay? Pinakagusto ko, Teacher Glay at saka Teacher Pau. Okay? Yung reminder kanina that your students need the best version of you. So yung taking care of ourselves. Kasi totoo lang talaga, nag-rub talaga sa mga estudyante natin yan. Pag pagod ka, kapag irritable ka or you're not in your best condition, you will not really be able to perform or deliver your best. Okay? So always take care of yourself. Ako talaga pag kailangan ko, ramen all day, or K-drama. Pag kunyari talagang pagod ako, K-drama, isang buong binge watching ng K-drama. Or right now, for example, nanonood ako ng Crash Landing. Pag feel bad na talaga ako, talagang kailangan ko ng feel good, no? Balik ako dun sa mga go-to K-drama ko. So mga ganun, no?
Yeah.
So, I really want, and of course, isa rin sa mga pinakagusto ko rin na na-mention ni Teacher Glay naman kanina is that yun nga, um, lagi no, kasi baka meron tayong impression na kapag pinagsama-sama, like, sama-sama sila dyan. Kaya yung mga may different learning needs, yung mga regular learning needs natin, then inclusion na yan kasi pinagsama-sama. But actually, that's not going to be it. No? As actually, pag hindi nakaset yung mga tools, strategies, yung accommodations and modifications, it's actually harmful to the students, no, Teacher Glay, if I'm not mistaken. No? Syempre si Teacher Glay yung mas may ability to to share on that case. Okay? Teacher Pao, any questions or insights?
Yan.
Okay.
Sige. Invite ko rin yung mga teachers na if you have any further questions with Teacher Glay, she's still here and she will still be able to accommodate your questions. Although, ano na ba, alas 7 na ba ng umaga dyan sa lugar mo?
Yes
Anong
po,
oras na?
6:53 a.m. So, we're live in my classroom right now. Mabuhay. So, ayan. Feel free to ask questions po. And yeah, if you have questions na hindi nyo maisip ngayon, feel free to reach me sa email. So, I have my Gmail in there kasi baka mapunta sa spam ng school email ko. So, mas maganda na sa Gmail. So, hey, it's missg@gmail.com. Ayan
All
po.
right.
Thank
Teacher
you.
Glay, I just would like to ask, no, kasi you've been to different places already. What was the most challenging experience of inclusion in in your teaching career? Yung ang hirap ma-address yung concern.
Siguro yung differences bawat setup, differences sa bawat country. Kasi when we say parang special education or like, yeah, inclusion, iba yung standards sa Amerika, ibang standards sa UAE, iba rin sa Pilipinas. So, yung adjustment, kung paano mo masaserve yung mga needs ng mga bata, that's one big factor. Kailangan, tsaka yun nga, dito medyo mas mahigpit sila. Actually, before coming here, yung konsepto ko na, naku, pag mali ako ng ginawa dito, kulong. Parang ganon. But it's not like that. As long as ma-back up mo, lalo na yung sa mga documents, you're fine. You should be fine. Tsaka, laging yun, yung tanong ko nga sa, sa presentation, what is your why? Always go to that. And that will lead the way. So, yun. Parang lang, ilaw. Ayun. So, yun ho.
Pero
You're
no,
alive.
talagang very, very challenging kasi talagang Teacher Pao and Teacher Glay, no, wala, kasi di ba minsan pag meron tayo, for example, pag nangyari sa case natin, Teacher Pao, no, makapag-prepare tayo ng lessons at yung mga lessons na yun, pwede mo siyang gamitin every time, no, at pwede mo siyang i-modify in a way. Pero pagdating sa case, for example, kapag meron ka talagang varying learners sa loob ng classroom mo, lalo na pag meron mga iba't ibang learning abilities, hindi ka pwedeng basta-basta nag-a-apply nung nagamit mo na before. Sometimes you really have to like make something from scratch and from new one that actually suits your students. Well, actually, ideally dapat yun naman talaga yung case, no. Pero in most cases of course, no, sa mga regular natin, learners natin, meron tayong yung mga presets na nagagamit, no. Pero with that different kinds of setup, iba din yung demands talaga. Okay? Kaya sabi nga nung kanina sa audience natin, Teacher Pao, Teacher Glay, medyo nakakapagod minsan kasi ang dami mong isipin, andyan yung administrators, andyan yung mga parents, nandyan din yung resources, okay? At sa Pilipinas, Teacher Glay, no, syempre, na din may pagkakaila na malaki yung talagang pagkukulangan or pangailangan sa resources. Okay? Yung mga teachers natin are just very, very resourceful at talagang matindi at matatag ang mga gurong Pilipino. Hindi sinusukuan, no, kahit ang daming pagsubok. And again, thank you so much for all the things that you do, no, teachers. No? And again, huwag tayong susuko. Ilaban pa rin natin katulad nga ng sabi ni Teacher Glay, always find your whys, no? At makikita mo yung inyong how, in finding your whys. Okay. Ako naman, Teacher Glay, ang question ko naman is that since you've experienced, no, actually, I know that you've taught in the Philippines for quite some time,
Mhm.
and then you moved to UAE, and then now you're in the US. Okay. Siguro, ano yung, if there's something that you wish is we have in the Philippines that you're actually able to experience, you're able to do in UAE and also in the US, ano yun na sa tingin mo makakatulong para mas palalimin, mas palawakin ang inclusion sa Pilipinas?
Sige, simulan ko sa leadership. I think it's very important that our school leaders parang know about inclusion. It's very important that these people who are in the top rank parang know the priorities and the needs of the education system. So, syempre, as teachers, wala tayong magagawa. Wala tayong medyo magagawa doon. But I think another thing is that we continue to be resourceful, be innovative. Kasi yun yung mga skills, be flexible. Alam ko we are really extending and doing our best as teachers. When it comes to resources, iba't ibang bansa, iba't ibang klase ng resources. Pero dito talaga ako sobrang proud sa Pinoy, kahit saan ako pumunta. Nakikita mo na very innovative. Bigyan mo ng papel, ng marker, kaya nilang gumawa ng visual aids, kaya nilang pagandahin ang classroom, kaya nilang gumawa ng iba't ibang activities para sa mga learners. Yun, ipagpatuloy natin yon. And siguro, ito, alam ko naman na talagang we're getting there. Yung labeling ng estudyante. Ayan, sorry, medyo may announcement.
Anyway, no, anyway, totoo yun, ano, yung leadership and administration, okay? Napaka-importante yan because that's the anchor for all the things that we do. No? So, kahit gaano, for example, katindi or ka-dedicated si teacher, kapag hindi naka-inline si administrator at iba yung hinihingi, for example, ano yung demand, okay? In a way, it will disrupt yung flow ng design for inclusion na ginawa ni teacher, okay? And that's why the leadership administration is actually very, very crucial in not only designing, planning, and even the implementation of an inclusion or accommodation or modifications in the classroom. Okay, and again, that's going to provide that much needed support. Yan. Okay na ba? Tapos na ba ang announcement, Teacher Glenn? Okay.
Ay, di pa, di
Di
pa
pa.
tapos.
Okay. So,
Actually, totoo yung sinasabi ni Teacher Glay nga, na gano'n, na leadership. But then again, we'd like to empower, teachers, no? Parati rin naman sinasabi ni Sir Franco yun na, huwag kang titigil. Ipakita mo na nag-work siya, na kaya niyang mag-work, no? Hindi kasi tayo tumitigil talaga, no? Finding ways, mapapansin at mapapansin din yan ng admin, no? Samahan natin ang matinding dasal. Pero
yes.
I think, no, you really have to voice it out. You really have to air it out. Siyempre, in a polite way, no? Kahit na inis ka na, diba? Pero, it will benefit us in the long run if we don't stop, no, showing that this will actually work, provided that we are given the necessary support. So, yan, nararamdaman ko. Kasi, ayan, one step na tayo dyan si Teacher Therese, di ba? Nakita nyo naman kung ano yung credentials din ni Teacher Therese. Di ba? Mabigatan yun. DepEd ang meeting niya ngayon, di ba? Pero, I think, no, with the heart that has been shown by Miss Glyza and by Teacher Therese, that's something, no? That's something that we can bank on. Yan.
May tanong tayo, no? Pero ito ay tanong na sasagutin natin sa ating session on Saturday, Miss Teacher Angie, no? Because our Saturday event is on the differentiated learning, on addressing different learning styles and preferences. Okay, so wag natin i-preempt, Teacher Angie. We'll get into that on Saturday. We will have a full loaded session, no? Yours truly, by Teacher Pau and also by me, on Saturday about strategies, approaches, tools, okay, that addresses different learning styles and preferences. Okay? So, talagang sinegment natin siya, Teacher Angie, no? Inisa-isa natin siya. Pag naman papakita ko ulit yung poster, talagang yung differences kapag sa learning abilities, differences in learning styles and preferences, differences in access to internet. We're going to talk about that in the last day. Okay? So, we're trying to target all kinds of differences, okay, of our students so that we'll be able to actually accommodate them inside our classroom. Okay? So, yun. Teacher Glay, any other insights or may announcement pa ba dyan sa background mo?
Okay
I'm so
na ba?
sorry for the announcement. Nagre-ready lang kami kasi we had 2 tornado warnings yesterday and we were
Mm.
on lockdown. So, ayun, I'm glad na gawa natin to. Again, thank you Kaagapay for inviting me yan, to share whatever we have in here. And sana maka-inspire tayo ng mga guro to start some, alam ko ginagawa naman siya sa classroom sa Pinas eh. So, we're good. We're getting there.
Totoo,
Yan.
yes. Yun nga, so wag lang tayong teachers to. Although, yun nga, kapit lang kasi alam natin yung reality talaga, Teacher Pao, Teacher Glay, na talagang mahirap at minsan mapapatanong ka na lang na hanggang kailan ko ba titiisin itong mga bagay na to. Pero we are at the frontliners of education. Talagang pag tayo na yung subuko, then mahirap na makabawi basta-basta ang edukasyon natin. So let's keep it that, okay? And let's just wait until everything aligns, okay? To be able to support all the good things and the great things that we're doing as teachers. Okay? So, yan. Teachers, maraming salamat, no? I know and it was communicated to me that Teacher Glay had to be on task already in her school. So, we'll now say goodbye to Teacher Glay. And again, maraming salamat, Teacher Glay, for sharing your expertise and your experiences as a SPED teacher in another country. Maraming salamat and take care, Teacher Glay, and we'll see you again soon here at
See you
KTS. Okay,
soon.
teachers, let's bid Teacher Glay goodbye and say our thanks and appreciation in the chat. Maraming salamat, Teacher Glay.
Bye.
Thank you, Teacher Glay. Ingat po. Ayan.
Yan. Okay, so ang ganda. Grabe, no? At alam mo
Loaded.
sa to lang, kanina hindi ko alam, parang natitiri-eye daw kayo, syempre, kasi teacher natin yung nagsasalita. Like, at kitang-kita mo sa mga mata niya yung pagiging proud kanina na
Yes.
mga estudyante ko to at ito yung mga tinuturuan ko before sa classroom at ngayon doing something like this na. No? Kaya we're very, very thankful and as well to Teacher Tiris for molding us into teachers. Ito yun. Ito yung klase ito yung natin, reward natin as teachers, okay? You will not see it now. You will not see it tomorrow. You might not see it in the next week. And you might not see it in the next month or next year. But you will see all the fruits that you have been doing and you have been sacrificing for in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years tayo si Sir Jambi. May may class lang si Teacher Jambi. So yun so wag natin let's keep going. Okay, let's at katulad din namin sa KTS, we're also going to keep moving forward with all of you. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
Teacher Glay, Teacher Pao, we'd like to inform our teachers, invite our teachers for our session tomorrow. Okay? Yeah, we're back-to-back since na-reschedule tong session natin for today. So we have our usual Saturday event, Thursday event.
Thursday.
Last on the beginning of our August series, we talk about Google Workspace accessibility features. Now we're going to talk about Microsoft Office 365 accessibility features. Pag-uusapan naman natin ano yung mga features and tools ni Microsoft Office 365 that promotes inclusion and accessibility. Okay?
Yes, don't
and
forget
of course,
that.
Yes, so syempre wag nating kasi ang dami, Teacher Pao, sobrang pack ng features ni Microsoft in terms of accessibility features.
Yes,
and
correct.
of course, we are also inviting everyone for the entire series. Okay, ayan, okay? Para lang hindi natin makalimutan that we have a full series ahead of us. Okay? So we're just our second installment. Okay? On Thursday, we have the Microsoft Office 365 accessibility features. Okay? On Saturday, we'll be talking about, Teacher Pao and I will be talking about differentiated learning. Ito naman yung about learning styles and preferences. Okay? For the non-SPED teachers, to address those. But again, regardless if you're non-SPED or SPED, itong mga concepts natin and principles are actually applicable in all of those circumstances as teachers. Okay? Yep. And of course, on August 26th, we'll be talking about EdTech, EdTech playlist, tools for accessibility and inclusion. So yan naman yung lahat ng mga tools na pwede mong gamitin outside of the Google Workspace for Education, outside of the Microsoft Office 365, ano pa ang meron. at napakadami pa niyan. Okay? And of course, we're gonna end our series with low bandwidth education.
Siyempre, Sir
Yes,
Franco, di ba?
navigating limited connectivity for distance learning. Tatry natin bigyan ng solusyon. Ano ang pwede natin gawin kapag mahina ang internet kasi yun ang pinakamalaking problema, di ba? Gusto mo mag distance learning pero wala kang internet connection or mahina ang internet connection. Yan ang gagawin natin Saturday next week. Okay? We'll try to address not an all-encompassing solution, but hopefully addresses some of your concerns. Okay? That's going to be on next Saturday. Okay?
Yep. Yan.
Yan.
So,
Okay,
jump back talaga ang
so
ating August
yes.
series, no? And we'd like to thank the teachers who really came by now, no? Sa isang maulang Wednesday. At bukas ay meron pa. Yan. Ito na ba yung pinakakaabangan nila, Sir Franco?
Yes, syempre
Yan.
yung ating evaluation link, papakita
Yes,
natin, no?
oo.
So sa mga tatanong, ito na po ang ating evaluation link, no? This is at https ://tinyurl.com August Series P2. Okay? So again, reminder po sa mga teachers natin that certificates are sent in 5 to 7 days. Okay? Bigyan niyo po ako ng chance magkaroon ng love life at social life. Just kidding.
Sabi nga ni
Ah,
Teacher Therese, di ba? Kailangan you're
oo.
always at your best.
Yes.
Pagbigyan.
Parang pagbigay, no? Yes, correct, no? So teachers, please accomplish our evaluation link now that will be used for your certificates. Okay, please make sure that you encode the correct information, your name, and also your email address. Kasi pag mali po ang email address, nagba-bounce back po sa amin ang certificates nyo. Pag mali po ang name sa evaluation link, mali din po ang ibang name sa inyong certificates. Okay, so please do a review your information. Okay?
Credentials. Yes,
Yes,
correct.
credentials. Yan, maraming salamat, no?
Yan.
Teacher Pau, okay? Ano pa ba ang ating mga
Uy,
dapat
grabe. Kanina, nung nagsisimula pala si Teacher Therese, alam mo yung nagpa-flashback ako dun sa anong sabi ko. Anong subject ko nga to dati? EDSP 1.
ang
Hinahanap ko
dami.
eh, di
Oo.
ba? Pero I
Madami
think
akong
she was
subject kay
able
Teacher
to,
Therese.
yes, correct. She was able to bring us to the context of the Philippines. Even the laws, she made us aware of that, no? Or yung mga aware na, or yung iba na ngayon palang nalaman, ay meron palang ganon. Kasi nga, it's not openly taught. No, it's not really technically a subject in some education universities, no. Pero it's nice to know. It's nice to know that we have these laws and these are our limitations. Kasi from there, kumbaga, yun lang din yung framework mo. Work with what you have. Hindi naman kasi talagang pwedeng lahat na lang sana all, 'di ba? Pero
Yes.
What makes us the best resources? I would always say that teachers are our best resources kasi diba ang dami natin. Mga ano na yan, palamuti na yan. Pero ang talagang kailangan nating i-improve ourselves, no? Because we are the best resources, no? And yung sinabi nga ni Teacher Glay kanina, it's really intentional, you know? Inclusion is intentional. It's not incidental. Na, sige, nataon lang may bata akong ganito, atas ganyan. Hindi, igagawan mo ng paraan. Kasi inalam mo kung nasaan siya. So, it's really intentional. Kaya, yun, it's a great reminder for all of us, no? Especially those non-SPED teachers. Yeah.
Yes,
Very
no?
much.
Talaga at siguro continue lang natin, and of course we're also going to still continue to provide opportunities like this, no? Kaya nga buong month, no, dinedicate natin sa inclusive education. Kasi precisely, Teacher Pao, that's actually the origin of this series, no? I've received some comments from our SPED teachers not receiving enough training or not having, kasi ang daming webinar, no, parang punong-puno ng webinar sa panahon ng pandemic, pero if you scour and you look into those webinar, wala talagang webinar that talks about or are addressed particularly to these topics, no. And that's the reason why sabi and they're requesting, Sir Franco, can we have at least one webinar? Sabi ko, we can't have one webinar. Let's give one series for it. Okay. Kailangan din ng buong series, no? 6 webinars, and actually it's still not enough, okay, but we still continue to find ways it might become a regular part of our series every month, okay, that at least one of our sessions, okay, will be targeting of course, or helping our teachers from mga SPED teachers natin kasi they really need help as well, okay? Kasi tama ka, Teacher Pao, talagang our teachers are our best resource, okay? Kaya nga dyan talaga nagpo-focus ang Kaagapay Teacher Support, okay? Providing as much assistance as we could to our teachers, because we know if our teachers are in good condition and they know and they're fully informed and fully equipped with all of these skills and knowledge, they will be able to transform the classroom. Yun. Okay. So teachers, with that, we close our session. Okay, maraming salamat ulit. I think wala naman akong comment that the link is not working. So I
Yes,
think
it's
it's working.
working. Yes.
Okay, so maraming salamat, teachers. And we'll see you tomorrow for our third installment for our August series. Okay. Maraming salamat, teachers. Paalam po, stay safe.